You will never find where you're going.
When Nigeria is working, we will all know.
PDP and us are diametrically opposed.
SaharaTV, let them be the TV, the best TV, information, education, inspiration. SaharaTV, they get
I am from SaharaTV. I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Information, education, inspiration. SaharaTV, they get mouth, they get mouth.
Welcome back, viewers. Once again, my name is Adeola Fayon. We've been talking a lot about the recent killings that happened at Nigerian schools. First of all, the Mubi Polytechnic killing in Adamawa State on October 1st/2nd, where more than 43 people were killed off campus. And also, we are talking about the Alu community killing, where four University of Port Harcourt students were killed in cold blood in broad daylight and even burned to death after being tortured mercilessly. Now, we spoke earlier with a brother of one of the victims of the Mubi Polytechnic killing, and he told us about how the family is dealing with it and struggling, hoping for answers to a lot of questions. And right now, we will be speaking with someone that will shed more light into why all this is going on. He has been through it. He was a student union president when he was at the University of Obafemi, when he was at Obafemi Awolowo University. We are speaking with Mr. Lanre Legacy. Mr. Lanre, welcome to SaharaTV.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So, Mr. Lanre, let's start with the Mubi killing because we just spoke with a brother of one of the deceased. What did you think happened?
Well, like I would always say that situations like this don't just happen. It must have a precedent some way. There must be a precedent to this kind of situation. There must have been a kind of breakdown in either administration, in either ensuring justice. The government agencies, enforcement agencies must have been very weak. A lot of things would have happened earlier before that situation. Like you saw on the clip, the pictures, a situation where you have students being lined up and then some murder, just taking place. It's not something that anybody can condone. And for me, like I would say, terrorism, cultism, anarchy, whatever you call it, are all signs of a failing system needing political and social overhauling. And it tells me that there's a call for modification of our law enforcement and judicial agencies. And there's nothing short of that. It's not easy for us to conclude now that it's a case of pure case of cultism. It could have been several other things. Why one cannot really allege it to be a religious issue or a Boko Haram issue because of the peculiarity of that environment, we cannot totally rule out too that it could be some other things apart from where we are looking at it that is just cultism or internal issue within the university. But like I would say, it's still too early for us to conclude. We can watch the aspects of terrorism, we can watch the aspects of cultism, and several other issues internally within that institution for now.
What about the killing in Uniport? How will you describe that?
Well, the Alu killing is quite unfortunate. If you go through what happened within the video, you would see clearly that it's sheer brutality and jungle justice being meted out to those 4 students that were killed. It is not to say, too, that the situation just happened from the blues. Like, I would want to point out to anybody that cares to understand. Right now, the situation in Alu is a 2-pronged dimension.
Okay.
One, there must have been incidents earlier before that time that we've all, or they must have seen a clear-cut negligence or total abdication of their own responsibility in terms of the law enforcement agencies. There must have been situations in time past where they've arrested people, handed them over to the police, and the police have failed in its responsibility. Before you have a community like that taking laws into their hands, before anarchism could be, allowed by a large chunk of group of people, it's as a result of the failure of the system itself. It doesn't just happen like that.
But even if they've handed people to the police in the past and there was no justice, does that justify what these people?
No. You see, Adiola, the truth about it is that nobody would encourage this. Nobody would encourage jungle justice. I personally vehemently would condemn the issue of jungle justice by any community. I, as a union leader, I have had the opportunity of being faced with this kind of situation several times. Like I would like to recall, we had a similar case in Ife in 1999, where cultists were just walking on their own and they saw another fellow student who splashed water on their car, and there was this kind of brutality meted out to that student. And when we got to the room, we were searching for those cultists just to ensure that there's justice. We saw with them a large chunk of arms and ammunition in their room. And
right on campus, right? Right on campus.
Right on campus. Right on campus. While they were being cross-examined, they told us that the vice chancellor happened to be their sponsor, or their patron.
The vice chancellor of the school.
The vice chancellor of Obasanjo University at that time happened to be their patron. So we had no option than to hand them over to the police. But let me tell you what happened. You see, immediately we handed them over to the police, the vice chancellor shut down the school. Wow. Students were asked to go home. And eventually, the police released them within a week. Till today, it still remains one of the fastest criminal cases ever tried in Nigeria.
So if you had handed them to the school authority, there wouldn't have been justice. And you thought if you should give them to the police, there would be justice. But it ended up being...
That's the exact situation I'm facing. We couldn't have handed them over to the school authority where the vice chancellor had been indicted. The police that happens to be the custodian of that would have ensured justice or enforced justice, you understand, were trusted in this case, and they betrayed the students' trust. They were released within a week. Eventually, these cultists were the ones that came back with the support of the vice chancellor to carry out the killing that later happened in July 10, 1999.
They killed students, right?
5 union leaders were killed.
Five student union leaders.
5 union leaders were killed. Now again, to show you the trust the students had, we arrested early morning of that day of July 10. We arrested the cultists that came around to come and perpetrate that act. And eventually from 2, we eventually arrested 33 of them.
Wow.
We handed them over to the police. We went through the court to ensure justice. Can you believe what happened? They were let loose again. Police aided their release. Police, retraced their documents, changed most of the vital evidence. The judiciary too did not help. And at the end of the day, they were let loose. So those who were killed on July 10, the union leaders that were killed, how do you want them to feel?
Wait, so has that case been, have they conclusively investigated the killings of those people till today?
No conclusion.
And this is 2012. So
this is 2012.
We should probably not expect anything soon about the people that were recently killed, like any investigation.
And I can remember what happened then. Let me tell you what happened then. Even the Minister of Justice, the then Attorney General, came down to Ife, and what he himself encouraged was jungle justice.
Okay,
I am telling you this.
So I guess the question right now is, nobody really knows if this community has done something like this before. I mean, if they are just starting out doing this jungle justice, should they go after 4 people?
I can tell you this. Let me tell you this. I am not speaking for anybody. I am not encouraging the issue of jungle justice.
Okay.
But there must have been scenario
where the police have failed to carry out justice.
Issue of robbery.
Definitely.
And the community has tried as much as possible to arrest such situation, trusted the police, and the police have failed in time.
I totally agree with that, but quickly I want you to talk about inadequate housing facilities for students on campus. How much trouble is that really causing us? Because these Alu killings is because those guys were living off campus. So does this have anything to do with the fact that some of the housing facilities in our universities are not adequate?
Well, if there's anything to help improve the welfare of students on campus, I think it's a good one. It's going to help to make sure that students are much more serious. It's going to help students in such a way that they are close to their own immediate environment. They have little or nothing to do with the outside. But sincerely speaking, that is not the problem. We can have situations in university communities where there will be need for the law enforcement agencies to do their job. If they fail, you will eventually have students themselves taking laws into their hands.
I guess what I'm trying to say is there are situations where 12 people may be in a room meant for maybe 4 people or whatever, and people decide it's actually cheaper to live off campus, not knowing what the community is like, and So do you think that not having enough housing facilities on campus has to do with reason why some students live off campus?
Yes, clearly speaking, it's because of inadequate facilities that students live on campus. But who says tomorrow that we cannot even have people in Port Harcourt who decide just to be an off-campus student?
That's true.
I think we should try to separate the two issues clearly.
Okay.
There's need for more accommodation, no doubt about that. There's need for government to put much more money into providing hostels for students on campus. But beyond that, there is a great need as at today, for us to look into the problem of law enforcement in Nigeria. It's not just about students alone. It's about even the larger community. Today, if people should arrest an armed robber in most other communities, what they want to do is jungle justice. Because people have come to understand that there's a failure in the law enforcement agencies, and they don't believe in it any longer. And where people cannot trust law enforcement agencies, where they don't have hope in the government to ensure justice, we would eventually have a situation where people will take laws into their hands.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of situation that you have. People who are not trained professionally to ensure justice, people who are not trained professionally to investigate, before they really come to pin down a culprit, they've meted out jungle justice, killing innocent students, innocent people along.
I was about to say that in this case they killed the wrong people. They killed innocent people. So what lesson can we learn from this? The police failure, people taking laws into their hands?
First and foremost, I think we need to really overhaul the law enforcement agencies that we have. And it's a failure of the government on its own. And to me, I am equally using this opportunity, this situation, to proclaim that it calls for the need to have state police or community police. Because if we have a community police that is trained, a community police that is closer to the people, who understands the pain the people are suffering because of one thing or the other, they would really know when to react and act well, rather than leaving it to a situation where people would have to eventually take laws into their hands. So on its own, rather than use it to whisk off the demand for community policing, I think it even calls for the need to have state and community police in our various communities. And I think that's the lesson from that.
All right, Larry.
If we have in Alu, we will have this problem.
All right. My last question is, how can we prevent something like this from happening in other campuses, like our other campuses in Nigeria? How do we prevent, as a student union leader, what do you have to say to students? So that we can prevent another occurrence like this?
No, clearly speaking, you see, for me, I would want to condemn this kind of brutality. And I keep on telling to the students, which was what we did even in 1999, after July 10, when we arrested this country. We keep on saying it. You cannot use one wrong to correct another. You can't go on jungle justice, killing people without thorough investigation. Even when you are sure, it's a responsibility that you have to convince the people, the citizenry, that someone is actually guilty. And that responsibility lies in the enforcement agencies and the judiciary. You have to prove this. You have to provide this. If you don't do this, you are not in any way different from the criminals you're trying to apprehend,
so
the criminals you are trying to reprehend in any way.
So people should be educated.
Students should get enlightened and understand that there's need for us to be law-abiding. And
my last question, the students protested by going to Alu, burnt down houses. What's your take on that?
I think that, again, itself is wrong. But it's understandable. They would eventually want to direct their grievances one way or the other to that community. But to me, their protest should not have been to Alu community. Their protest should have been to the state police. Their protest should have been to the government. Their protest should have been to that system that failed, that eventually brought that incident to happen, not the reaction in its own, in this case we're talking about.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Legacy, for joining us today on this show and giving us more insight as to what went down and how to deal with things like this. We so much appreciate your time. Thank you.
It's nice being with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, viewers, there has been Mr. Lanre Legacy, a former student union president at Obafemi Awolowo University. And before we take a break, when we come back, we'll be talking with Mrs. Uzoma Okoye. She's a social worker at the Nigerian University of Nsukka. So she will talk to us about why people will take actions as drastic and barbaric like this. So stay tuned, we'll be right back.